So you'll recall just weeks ago, a number of governors in the Democratic establishment and the Biden campaign really pushed to continue moving forward with in-person primaries. This even after the CDC had issued guidelines against gatherings of people. So this was very much in defiance of the CDC guidelines. Ohio moved their primary, but 3 other states did not. Florida, Illinois, Arizona, several of those with very large elderly populations. And of course, as we covered at the time, oftentimes it's elderly individuals who are volunteering to work at the polls. And now we are getting the horrible news that a third poll worker in Florida has tested positive for coronavirus, and the 300 and some voters who came in contact with that poll worker are now being notified. But this is exactly why, Saagar, we talked at the time, and Ryan Grimm, I want to give him all the credit. He's really been highlighting this and has been very aggressive, calling out both the Biden and the Sanders campaign for their lack of leadership and accountability on this. But it was egregious that they pushed forward with this, and the Biden campaign in particular putting out misinformation, basically saying, look, if you don't have any symptoms, it's safe for you to go to the polls. Well, this poll worker had no symptoms at the time, but as we know and knew at the time, asymptomatic carriers are exactly what has led to such a rapid spread of this disease.
It's terrible. And as we see actually from the specifics of this case, this poll worker had no symptoms on election day and got sick 6 days later. That's almost exactly the incubation period for how long it takes in order to show symptoms. Who knows how many people they infected at the time, how many people who were using the voting equipment. As we had said, are there proper sanitization protocols and all these other things in places? It could have killed people. And it was very dangerous for both campaigns not to totally discourage people from going to the polls and demanding really that the states and the Democratic Party just stand up and say, hey, look, we've got to shift this thing because it is not safe. We commend all the governors who've moved their elections now. But at the time, look, it was just as dire then. I mean, all of the same healthcare information that we had 2 weeks ago, whenever this happened, we knew it all. We knew it all, what we know today, what we know then, and they still moved forward with the vote. And it really did put people in danger.
I mean, this was a period that was incredibly critical because it's when it was really taking hold in our community. I mean, this is when it was spreading like wildfire, because part of what is so hard about this virus is because you do have that incubation period. The time you need to act is before you really get a sense of just how bad it is. And this was during that critical time period. It was even sort of late during that critical time period that they pushed to move forward. And of course, you know, it was blatantly obvious what was happening at the time is blatantly obvious now. They saw that Joe Biden was going to do well in those states. They wanted to put Bernie Sanders down. So they pushed to move forward with in-person primary voting, making all these comparisons to previous crises, and we didn't let democracy to die then. Well, you could have pushed it off and figured out how to do mail-in balloting so that everyone could participate. And now, of course, that Biden does have this large lead in terms of delegates, a significant lead in terms of delegates. Now they're ready to shut all the democracy down. That's it. We've had enough primaries. We've had enough voting. We've had enough debates. Let's just shut it all down and hand it to Joe or maybe Andrew Cuomo. If we
no debate, no voting, all of that. Let's just move it to the convention. The whole thing is ridiculous. And again, this is part of the other issue that we have with this is that all of these things, and for good reason, are left up to the states. But it lets these states basically just do whatever they want whenever it comes to so much of the way that we vote in this country. And having all these like wildly divergent things in terms of a county by county basis, sometimes all the way up into the states, it leads to situations like this, which is that states did not get on top of this from the beginning. And now what's happening in Florida? Outbreak. What's happening in Louisiana? I mean, not shutting down the polls was just as irresponsible as not shutting down businesses and restaurants. Well, New Orleans let Mardi Gras continue. Now they have a massive outbreak there.
Right.
New York City had their bars open for St. Patty's Day weekend. Now they literally have one of the largest outbreaks, and a huge amount of young people actually who are the ones who spread and have caught the virus and are now leaving and fleeing New York City and infecting everywhere else, which is a huge public health nightmare on its own. So it just goes to show that whenever we had the information and people were calling for this, forward-thinking people, these authorities did not listen, and they have put elderly people in danger.
They have put so many people, so much of their population at risk. And on the Democratic Party side, I mean, how hypocritical too, at the same time that they were criticizing President Trump, rightfully so, for a lack of response, not taking it seriously. At the very same time, Joe Biden, Simone Sanders, Tom Perez are all going out and saying, go ahead and vote, no problem, don't worry about it. You can just, stay safe, use some hand sanitizer, but everything will be fine. Completely irresponsible.
Really terrible.
And now we see the results. All right, we'll have more Rising for you after this.